Well, I'm here to consider a particular problem in this corner of the Garden Railway. And so I'm going to switch the camera around the other way and show you what my problem is. Basically, the track bed, not the track, has moved. I think if I come in closely, you can see the shadow of where the track was. Now, I believe this is actually quite recent. You can see how the screw is straining there, pulling over, how the track joints are kind of at an angle, and you can see here, so it looks as though the timber has moved that way and it's pulling the track with it, which is screwed into some other places. That screw is completely in midair. Would have been somewhere in there. So this track was over there, and as you can see, that screw is being strained as well. So the track was well over there. Let's pull back. I'll show you, well over there, and this is solid. Can you see me trying to shake? That was just the front end. If I try and shake it, it's pretty well solid, but it has moved. Now, the only change this year is me raising the lawn, but in order to raise it, I have rested some timber against the posts along here, and then there's quite a bit of weight of gravel and soil against that, and I'm wondering if that has pushed the post over, if that would have done it. Can't see the post under there, but certainly, and what I noticed as well was the gaps at this end were bigger. I mean, not as evident on the back, apart from the fact that I've had to pull this up a lot more to close the gaps here. So the track, there you can see the gap in the track. So, and in order to close the gap, this track is having to be pulled. That track should normally be over there somewhere. So even with the stretching, there's a problem. I hope you can hear me above the wind. So that's the problem I've got, and I need to spend a bit of time investigating that. If it's stable, if it's difficult to move back, the answer is actually to unscrew the track and relay it, which might be the simplest solution to the problem, but I do need to see what movement there has been in my timber track bed and see if I can work out why, bearing in mind that most of the soil here is a clay over boulders, but dig down a little bit, you're into clay. There are trees and things around. We've had dryness and wetness. Clay dries out, it moves, it shrinks, but I can't fully believe that just raising the lawn, which is what I've done, by a couple of feet, and that the weight of that is what's done it, but we'll investigate. Well, herein lies a thing. In another video, I was talking about FlexiTrack and various sorts of FlexiTrack, and I said at that time that what LGB call FlexiTrack is what I would call springy track. And so I wonder if this problem I've got here is as much due to the track being springy as any thought of it being flexible. And what I'm thinking is, because it's happened, it's taken 8 years, 7-8 years to happen, that perhaps, I don't know, maybe a bit less than that, I replace this length of springy track with some other track made out of brass rails, which I've got which I put through a rail bender, bend into shape, and then will hold their form, because at the moment this will only hold its form if screwed down to the curve, and I've got to get it the proper transitional curve, all of those problems with the curve, and it would be solved if I replace that length of springy track there, what LGB call flexi track, with some other brass track that I curve to a certain radius, and then I may be okay. Because I was looking at this front length section of track, and what I do note is it was pushing it that way there, it was pushing it this way here, that way there, which is what would happen if the track was straightening up. And the other parallel, hardly parallel, running track wasn't exhibiting the same problem. So I'm now relaxing a bit more, because I don't think it was my track bed that had moved. That seems to be as solid as ever, and is likely to be more or less in the same position it's been for quite a while, apart from the wood on the top distorting in places. Let me just show you that. I think you can see it's just curling up in places. The wood is curling. Right, a scanning video to show the joints as we go round. Joint here, it's fairly straight. I've closed the gaps at the fish plates. Sorry, that's a bit fast for those watching. The upshot of it is, I now no longer believe that my track bed or support, timber support, has moved a lot. It was just the springy flexible track here. I didn't replace it. I thought, well, I always look for the simplest, easiest solution, and that was just to reattach it with fresh screws. These are stainless steel screws. Actually, I couldn't find any more of the cheese heads, so these are countersunk. They're rather obvious. Might go and put a little bit of paint on those heads just to make them less obvious, but the main thing is the track is in place. I've not run anything over it, but I'm fairly sure I've still got enough gap between the two tracks here to allow trains to pass in either direction, but I got it to a reasonable line and have fixed it down. And so now the single piece here just got one screw in it, two screws at this end of the springy flexible track, and the joint just shows a little bit of kinkiness, but not bad. Then a screw at this end of the joints and one at that end in the curved track to hold that joint straight, and then the middle bit, which is pushed out that way, which would tend to pull this way, pressure applied to push it out, and two screws either side of the midpoint. The midpoint of that length of rail is about there, and so that springy track is held, and then just to keep it in place, a couple more screws. So my initial fears have been allayed, and I now believe when I do a bit of running I'll have some relatively smooth running track, and the only thing I might consider is adding a little bit of elevation on the outside edge of the track going around the curve, but now I think I've got a problem solved. I hope my rambling, explaining my thinking as I've gone through that, is of interest, but there is a problem solved. Time for our next video to be one of trains running. A little bit of packing for elevation under the outer track. A couple of trucks, give them a good push. And seem to go around all right. Try them in the other direction. Yeah, well, it's a reasonably good curve. It's uphill this way. They're not derailing anyway. I'm happy.